Today's daf is daf lamed ches, and before we start, let's just summarize what we saw here on daf lamed zayin amud beis. There are three psukim to exclude pidyon, or ransom money for chayve misas bezdin. In the case of mezid, we have lo sikhu kofer lenefesh hotzeach, we have kol cher mechayecha min adam lo yifteh, and we have the word kol. And we need one of them to teach us chayve misas chamuros, another one to teach us chayve misas kalos, and the difference is when there's kapara and shogeg. And then we need another case of misas kalos, in a case of derech aliyah. I mean to say an extra pasuk for derech yurid. And then we have a fourth pasuk in a case of golus and mum. Amalei Rav. So let's see where we're up to. We're on the fourth line down from the bottom, from the top of Lamed Ches. And Rav is now analyzing Rami Bar Chum. And he doesn't understand, why do we need a special pasuk for a case of a rotseach derech yerida, to teach me that even in that case of derech yerida, we don't accept any ransom money, but rather, if he was b'mezid, we kill him, and if he was b'shogeg, he has to go to golus. In other words, we cannot derive derech aliyah from derech yerida. We have Tani Debei Chizkiya. You remember that inverse equation analogy. The Tani Debei Chizkiya, Maka Adu Maka Behema, Ma Maka Behema Lo Chilakabo Ben Miskavin, the Chain of Miskavin Beder Yurida Beder Aliyah, the Fochubam Lachayv Molan. This was the principle of Adam Murliolam. Daf Maka Adam in the opposite way. Instead of being Machayavim, we'll pattern him up. Otachalik Bo Ben Bishogeg. Bein shogeg lebein mezid, bein miskavin l'sheinu miskavin, bein derech yirida v'derech alil chayvo mom l'fotcho mom, because of kim leib the Ramani. But clearly, we see in the drasha of Tanu Beit Chizkiya that there's no difference between derech aliyah and derech yirida, and therefore the Gemara now rejects the possibility that kol cherem is coming to teach me that there's no pidyon for a mechuyev misa, even in the case of derech yirida, because there's no difference between derech yirida and derech aliyah. Ela amar ami bar chama itzrich. We need the pasuk v'lo tikhu ofer lenefesh hotzeach to teach us that in the case of someone who's mechuyev misa, he's potter for tashlumin. He doesn't get both punishments, and it's not enough to derive that from lo yeh ason ono she'onesh because salkadat chamina hani milu. When do we apply the principle of asan in order to pater him up from mammon? He, with one hitting, he smit, is there such a word? He smit him in the eye and killed him. Boom. And in that case, there's a chiyuv mis and a chiyuv mammon coming from one akka. And therefore, we don't impose two punishments. Imagine a case where he hits him with two fists. With one fist, he knocks his eye out, and the other fist, he hits him. He takes a sword and kills him with a dagger in his knife, in his heart. Maybe there are two machayvim here, and even though both actions took place simultaneously, and it was be'idna, but nevertheless, they're two different actions that happen to coincide. But he should be paying ayin tachas ayin mammon for taking out the guy's eye. And for that, I need the pasuk of sikhu kofer lenefesh hotzeach to teach me that even in this case, mos yumos, and he will not pay mammon for taking out his eye. So the Gemara asks Samalei Rava raises an objection to Rabbi Bar Chama. Nami may either Tanya the Bechizkiya. Now we have a different Tanya the Bechizkiya. The Tanya the Bechizkiya, ayin tachasai v'lo ayin v'nefesh tachasai. The Torah goes out of its way to say ayin tachas ayin, to tell you that we only take an eye for an eye. Again, Chazal al pi Torah shebal peh mean money for an eye, but it's ayin tachas ayin. But we're not going to take an ayin and a nefesh, both his life and his ayin, meaning paying the value, the compensation for his eye. So once again, we're back to square one. Why do I need the apostle of sichlu kofar l'nefesh otzeah? Elamar Ravashi, Itzrich, I need the apostle of sichlu kofar l'nefesh otzeah. Salke daitach amina hoel v'chidush u'shechit ketor b'knas. The afal gav the miktal mishalem. So now Rav Ashi is going to shift our focus from Mammon to Knas. And the entire entity of Knas is a chidush, because logically there's no reason why you should be paying the Knas. It's all a penalty that the Torah imposed. And now you might say that if it's a penalty and he deserves Misa as a penalty for his crime, then we should impose upon him both penalties, Misa and Knas. Amash Malon. Therefore, I need the possible sikhu kofar l'nefesh otzeach to teach me that even in the case of Knas, we're going to say that he's potter from paying the Knas if he's chayev Misa. So the Gemara says, Ula Rabba, what are we going to do according to Rabba? Rabba holds that the one single exception to the rule of Kimle ben the Rabbin in the case of Misa is Knas. Ula Rabba di Omar chidush shechit Torah b'Knas v'afagav the mikto mishalim hai kol cherem mai ovim. So we're back to square one. What do we do with the extra pasuk? He holds like that opinion that holds that if a person is Yotzi Lihorig and someone else says about him, Erko, a lie, then Lo Omar V'lo Klum, and that's going to be derived from this pasuk. The Gemara had originally rejected it because of Chananya ben Akav. Narashin is Arsa, then is Garsha. What's the status? The Torah says that you pay Knas for a Nara Besula. She's still a Nara and she's still a Besula. But the pasuk also says Asher Lo Orasa, that she was not married. But here's a case where she was married, divorced, and then raped or seduced, and she's still a Besula, and she's still a Nara. Is here the Mishnah records Machlok Shin Rabbi Yossi Haglili and Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Yossi Haglili Omar Ein Lo Knas. The Torah says Asher Lo Orasa. Rabbi Akiva Omar Yesh Lo Knas. So what is the Torah adding Asher Lo Orasa? The Torah is now focused on who collects the Knas and pockets it. If it's Asher Lo Orasa, the father pockets the Knas. But if it's after Erisin, she now, so to speak, leaves the rishus of her father. Yesh Lo Knasu Knas Liatzma. She pockets the Knas. The Gemara asks my timer, the Rabbi Yossi Haglili, why does he hold that even after Erisin, that since it's after Erisin, even though she's a Nara and she's a Basula, nevertheless, there's no Knas. Oh, wait, that's for, okay, he's not coming today, I guess.
Oh.
Dovaria was going to take this.
Oh, really?
All right, I think.
Don't want it on the show.
Yeah, I think you did the right thing because he's not coming today.
No. Okay. And he says all those books are not his. So we have to get rid of a lot more books as soon as you're done with this year.
No. Those books,
There's
you're
a lot of
confusing
books.
two different
There's
boxes.
some in the box that I told him about.
Right, those books might belong to Avi Metzger. We have to find out. I just didn't get a chance because I was busy teaching.
No problem.
Okay, then? All right. So why does Rabbi Yossi Haglili say that after Erisin, she no longer collects Knas? Omakra, the answer is very simple. Asher Lo Orasa. There was no Erisin. Ha Orasa and Lo Knas. Now the ball is really in the court of Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva says even after Erisin, she collects Knas. Rabbi Akiva, Asher Lo Orasa. What do we do with that pasuk? And the answer is the Torah is asking and addressing who would pocket the Knas. There's definitely going to be a Knas. But lo rasa is la via. The father collects the knas, but ho rasa li atzma. Well, Meatos, the Gemara now rejects Rabbi or raises an objection to Rabbi Akiva. I don't understand. Every time it says a condition in this parsha for knas, I could always interpret it as an issue about who pockets the knas, the father or she herself. So when the Torah says nara, and we assume a bogeres is no knas, no. Bachinami v'liatzma. Maybe it means then in case of bogeres, the father is knocked off the radar screen and she collects her knas to herself. Or for example, it says besula. Now we assume that if she's a be'ula, there's no knas. No, if it's a besula, the knas goes to the father. But if it's a be'ula, then the knas goes to her. She pockets her own knas. Ella, you have no choice whatsoever but legamri to assume that when it says nara, it means that a bogeres has no knas whatsoever. When it says psula, be'ula doesn't get knas. It's hakanami. Why not apply the same yardstick and be consistent? In the case of Ashelo Orasa, that if she was Orasa, is legamri, she's completely knocked out of the parsha of collecting knas. Not her, not her father. Amalcha Rabbi Akiva, Hailo Orasa. I don't have the luxury of Rabbi Yossi Aglili to use Asher Lo Orasa to tell me at Ha Orasa less la knas. She doesn't collect knas. Why? Because I need Asher Lo Orasa for an entirely different derivation. He takes Asher Lo Orasa absolute condition for knas. But in the case where she was a rasa, even though she was niskarsha, but nevertheless she doesn't get a knas, even though she's still an Arab Basula. Rabbi Kiva Omer, yesh la knas uknasa lavia. It means that shelo rasa, and the knas is lavia. Now, we have to keep in mind that this Rabbi Akiva here in Brisa is not to be identified with Rabbi Akiva in our Mishnah. Rabbi Akiva over yesh la knas uknasa liatzma. And that's what he points out here in the Masifta. I just have to find it. Oh, here it is. In our Mishnah, Rabbi Akiva is talking about a case of nisarsa v'nisgarsha, and then she pockets her. The Brisa holds that in all cases it's knasa liavia. Right, Rabbi Akiva Omer yesh la knas uknasa lavia. Again, we have to figure out, according to Rabbi Akiva, how does he interpret Asher Lo Rasa? I didn't know, said Rabbi Akiva insists on this logic. Hoil via zakai, b'kesef kidushah. The Torah says that a father, in a case of a nara, and certainly in the case of a katan, how much more so, he pockets the kesef kiddushin. And that's derived from a pasuk of Yotza Chinam Ein Kos Ein Kos Lo Tel V'Yesh Kos Lo Nacher. Is therefore via Zakai B'Kesef Knasa. I mean, this whole business about Knas is because of her position to, her status vis-a-vis marriage, and he, the father, on a financial level, he's the bailam over the Kesef Kiddushin, he's the bailam over the Kesef Knas. A woman who was married off by her father as an Arab, but only Erisin. There was no Nisuin. Then she got a get. she goes back to the rishus of her father. Now, if he marries her more for a second time, he pockets the kesef kedusha. Lavia is af kesef knas af bishan is garsha leavia. So now we have to understand, what does the pasuk mean? It says asher lo oras, and according to Rabbi Akiva, there's no hair's breadth of a difference between orasa and lo orasa. Im kain matam lo mashal lo orasa mufne lahakish lo v'lo dune menik shav. We have a principle in Gzeir Shava. You can only derive a Gzeir Shava if it's mufne. If there's a pasuk that's completely superfluous. Now, what's the Gzeir Shava going to teach us? We have the parsha of Ones, we have the parsha of Mefat. And each parsha is Asher lo rasa, but each parsha is missing something, some element. And the other parsha is going to fill it in. Nemar Khan, in the case of Ones, it says Asher lo rasa, Nemar lahal, in the case of Mefat, Asher lo rasa. That's going to give you Gzeir Shava Makan in the case of Ones. B'chamishim, the Torah in the case of Mefat, it doesn't tell you how much money is the knas. It only tells you shkolim. But in the case of Ones, the Torah says chamishim. It doesn't say shkolim, it says 50. It's af lahalan Mefat, it's chamishim. Uma lahalan Mefat, where the Torah says shkolim. Afkan shkolim. So too here also in the case of Ones, the chamishim kesef means shkolim, not mos, not dinarim or any other currency, but rather shkolim. So again, let's just review. Rabbi Akiva needs asher lo rasa for Gzeir Shava, and for that he needs mufta, and therefore he cannot use asher lo rasa to exclude knas in the case of eretz and Miskarsha. And logically, he says that Arusam and Miskarsha should collect knas. Who should collect the knas? The father, because he collects the knas. He collects the money of kedushin, and therefore he collects the knas. Rabbi Akiva, my chazis. We're going to just end now, but let me just read the kash of the Gemara. My chazis asher lo arasa Gzeir Shava. He uses asher lo arasa for Gzeir Shava. Ubisula lemute ba'ula. And here on Amid Beis, Amo, why not say the exact opposite? Besula Gzeir Shava, because in both Ones and Mefat the word Besula appears. And that's going to teach me Chamishim Shkolim and Asher Losa Prat Le Narashid Sarsim Misgarsh. And Rabbi Akiva is going to have to find some logical reason why he chooses Asher Lo Rasa for the Gzeir Shava and gives up on the pasuk Besula for Gzeir Shava. Mistabra Asher Lo Rasa Gzeir Shava. Shareani Koraba Nara Bisula. At least in the case of Erisim, there was no intimacy. They didn't culminate the marriage. And therefore she's still a Nara Bisula. But if we're going to take the Gzeir Shava from Bisula, then we're going to come to the conclusion that if she's not a Bisula, she would still collect knas. And the whole basis, according to Rabbi Akiva, of knas is because she's a basula, violated a basula. So it says Adarabba. Why not say basula Gzeir Shava? Shareyani kori ba shelo rasa. Maybe what's critical here is that she never had a marriage relationship. And that's why the Torah forces the manis and mefata to pay a knas. And the Gemara says, "Sabistabra ha ishtene gufa ha lo ishtene gufa." If she already had a be'ila, that's a fundamental change in her body. And the pagam now of Ones and Mefat is less. She's already a be'ula. He's not making her into a be'ula. He's making her into a be'ula. That's really violating. Here, in the case of Nisarsa and Nisgarsha, as far as her body is concerned, nothing changed. It was just a legal relationship of eris and nothing more. And now the Gemara is going to embark upon a study of Rabbi Yossi Aglili, Hai Sfar Minolan. How does he know that in the case of Ones you pay shkolim, and in the case of Mefat you pay 50? He doesn't have the Gzeir Shava. It's not mufna. because he needs Asher Lo Rasa in order to derive the conclusion that after Erisin, she no longer is in the parish of collecting